Your knees ache going down the stairs. Your fingers feel stiff before you've even had your coffee. You've blamed your age, the weather, that old sports injury, everything except something so ordinary you don't even register it as food. 5 things you're probably eating are linked to quietly worsening the inflammation in your joints. The one at number 1 isn't the one most people blame first, and once you hear the actual numbers behind it, you'll understand why it might matter more than the other 4 combined. Stick around, because after each one, I'll tell you exactly what to eat instead. Let's start with the one you probably already suspect. Fried food sits at number 5 because at least you already have your guard up around it. Here's the actual mechanism. Every time oil hits high heat and starts breaking down, it produces compounds called advanced glycation end products, AGEs for short. A 2016 systematic review in the journal Nutrients looked at 12 controlled trials and found that diets high in AGEs raised a key inflammatory marker called TNF-alpha in the longer studies, the ones that ran 16 weeks or more. Here's the part that surprised me digging into this. The researchers were upfront that the evidence is still preliminary. Some of the trials were small. Only one had a genuinely low risk of bias, and not every inflammatory marker moved. But separately, researchers writing in the journal Bone and Joint Research documented something more concrete at the cellular level. AGEs bind to receptors on joint cells and switch on enzymes that break down cartilage directly. So you've got a cautious human signal and a much stronger cellular explanation underneath it for why that signal would exist at all. It's not really about frying itself. It's about repeated high heat. Restaurant fryers reuse the same oil for days, sometimes weeks, and every reuse cycle stacks more AGEs into the food you're eating, which is part of why fast food tends to test worse than food fried once, fresh at home. The swap. Air frying or baking with a stable oil like avocado oil dramatically cuts AGE formation, and you barely lose the texture that makes fried food fried food. Number 4 is refined sugar, specifically the high fructose corn syrup hiding in bread, ketchup, and salad dressing you'd never think to check. This is the one with a number that actually stopped me. Researchers tracking young adults for a study published in Nutrition and Diabetes found that people drinking high fructose corn syrup beverages 5 or more times a week were 3 times as likely to have arthritis as people who rarely drank them. 3 times. That's not a small effect for an observational study. And here's the detail that makes it more convincing, not less. The same study found diet soda showed no association at all. If the link were really about soda in general, or just about drinking too many sugary beverages of any kind, you'd expect diet soda to show something too. It didn't. That specificity points at the sugar itself. Now, this is a correlation, not proof that soda alone caused the arthritis. People who drink that much of it often differ in other ways too. But there's a plausible mechanism tying it to fried food. Excess glucose binds to proteins in cartilage through the same glycation process, just triggered from inside your body instead of from a frying pan. 2 different foods, overlapping chemistry, which is exactly why cutting only one of them barely moves the needle. And sugar's effect compounds when it's paired with the food at number 1, early research suggests. Together, they push inflammation further than either one manages alone. The swap, whole fruit instead of processed sweets. The fiber in something like an apple slows the glucose spike enough that the glycation process barely gets started before your body clears it. Bacon is not on this list for the reason you'd guess. It's not really the fat. A UK biobank study, and this one's genuinely massive, over 400,000 people found that every additional 50 grams of processed meat eaten per day was associated with a 38% higher level of CRP, a standard blood marker of inflammation. That's a bigger jump than the researchers saw for the same amount of fresh red meat or poultry. A separate study out of Iran, following women specifically, found the same pattern from a different angle. Higher processed meat intake tracked with higher leptin and MCP1, two other inflammation-related markers, even in a group where the CRP signal alone was weaker. I want to be straight with you about a catch here, because most videos on this topic skip it. When the UK Biobank researchers adjusted for body weight, most of that CRP effect shrank by around 2/3. So a meaningful chunk of the processed meat inflammation link is really a processed meat and extra weight link, not something in the bacon acting alone on your joints. That doesn't erase the association. A smaller independent effect is still there in the data, but cured meat directly attacks your joints, oversells what the numbers actually show. What's more defensible across both studies is simpler. Fresh, unprocessed meat consistently scores better than the cured version of the same cut, regardless of the weight question. The swap isn't eat more chicken breast instead of bacon. It's fresh over cured, whatever the protein is. A grilled, unprocessed cut beats a smoked or salted version of the same meat every time the two get compared. Number 2. Alcohol, and not for the reason people expect. It's not really about the calories. Alcohol measurably increases intestinal permeability, what people casually call leaky gut, and that's documented, not fringe science. A research review published through the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism found that plasma endotoxin levels rise in parallel with gut permeability in heavier drinkers, and that people with higher permeability had markedly higher rates of alcohol-related liver disease. Separately, a study in the journal Med found that in people with rheumatoid arthritis, markers of that same gut permeability tracked closely with how active their disease was on standard clinical scoring, and in mice, directly blocking the permeability-reduced joint swelling. Here's the honest gap, because I promised I'd give you those. Nobody has run the full chain alcohol to permeability to joint stiffness as one single study in humans. Each link is real on its own. The full chain is a reasonable inference connecting two solid bodies of research, not one study that nails the whole thing perfectly. This is the one people resist changing the most, and I don't think that's about the science being weak. I think it's because the habit is social, and swapping a frying oil feels a lot easier than swapping a Friday night. The swap, tart cherry juice. It sounds like a wellness fad, but it's one of the few natural anti-inflammatory swaps that's actually shown a measurable drop in joint stiffness markers in real trials, not just antioxidant marketing copy. Number 1 connects to more of what we've already covered than you'd expect, including the sugar at number 4. Number 1 is the one almost nobody puts at the top of these lists. Sodium. Not sugar, not fried food, salt. Here's where the real science starts, and it starts in a lab, not a diet study. In 2013, researchers publishing in Nature discovered that high salt concentrations directly switch on a specific type of immune cell, a Th17 cell that drives autoimmune inflammation. That's not a nutritionist's opinion, that's cell biology, replicated in both mouse and human cells. Then it moved into humans. A study tracking over 18,000 people found that the group eating the most sodium had about a 50% higher rate of self-reported rheumatoid arthritis than the group eating the least. And the relationship was dose-dependent, more salt-tracked with more risk, in a straight line, not a random scatter. A later systematic review, pulling together 8 separate studies on sodium and RA outcomes, found the same direction, pointing across most of them, though the review's own authors called the overall evidence scarce. I have to give you the honest caveat, because I promised I would, that RA data is self-reported and cross-sectional, which means it shows a strong association, not proof that salt alone caused it. There's even a newer study that found high sodium linked to lower mortality in people who already have RA, which complicates any simple salt is purely bad story. Nutrition science rarely hands you a clean, one-directional answer, and I'd rather show you the messy, real picture than a fake tidy one. What ties it together for me is this: salt is the only food on this list that doesn't announce itself. You can see fried food coming, you can taste added sugar. Salt hides in bread, in canned soup, in salad dressing, in things you'd never call salty public health data, suggests the average adult eats well above the recommended daily limit, almost entirely without choosing to. The dose adds up without you ever making a conscious decision to eat it. The swap isn't stop salting your food at the table. Table salt is a small fraction of most people's intake. It's cutting back on processed and packaged foods specifically, where the vast majority of dietary sodium actually comes from, and leaning on herbs, citrus, and vinegar for flavor instead. So the full list, in order: sodium, alcohol, processed meat, sugar, fried food. None of these are proven to single-handedly cause joint disease on their own. The honest version of this video is that each one is linked to inflammation through a real, documented mechanism with more or less human evidence behind it, depending on the food. Swap them one at a time, starting with whichever feels easiest, and pay attention to your own joints over a few weeks, rather than waiting for a study to tell you what you already felt. There's a completely different food group people assume is safe that's tied to joint inflammation for a reason almost nobody talks about, and that one's next.